Hello, everyone. This is Grant Callen with Empower Mississippi, and we're back for another installment of our video series, Coffee and Conversation. And I'm thrilled to be joined today by Khrysten Glass. And Khrysten is a sixth grade teacher at Nichols Middle School in Canton. So, Khrysten, welcome to the conversation.
Thank you so much for having me.
Khrysten is a graduate of Mississippi College, and also of note, she completed her master's degree this spring and was awarded Teacher of the Year for her school, and she came in second for the entire district that year. So clearly, you've got a bright future ahead of you in education.
I'm very, very grateful. I love to serve, and it's really a privilege to be able to do so with such young, impressionable minds. And so I'm grateful that God has called me to it, because it is definitely a calling for sure.
Well, what prompted you to think you wanted to go into education?
I've always had a love for children. I've always loved to serve, and I've always wanted to help others. And what better way to do that than to go in and day out and to try to instill values in these children, to give them foundational skills that they're going to need for years and years to come.
That's good. And you grew up in Canton, Mississippi, and you've decided to go back and teach in Canton.
Yes, majority of my primary and my secondary years were spent in Canton. That's where I was born and raised, and I knew when I graduated that that's where I wanted to go back to. I had um, an offer to go teach in Clinton. I actually did my student teaching in Clinton, but I felt a calling to go back to Canton, because it's such a rough area. It needs a lot of love. I'll put it that way. It needs a lot of love. It needs a lot of patience, and it needs people who are going to love on these children and show them the love of Christ through education as much as we possibly can. It needs people who are going to advocate for children and not just collect a paycheck. And I knew that I was that person. And so I wanted to go essentially be an advocate for these children. That's what they needed more than anything. Every school district needs that, but I felt in my hometown, that's what I needed to do. So it was never a question of where I was going to go. I knew that's where I was being called to go.
Wow, that's great. And, as a new teacher, I can imagine parts of it you were expecting, and parts of it surely has been different than you expected. So what are some of think of a point or two of sort of the high points of your first year in teaching, and maybe some of the things that were a lot harder than you expected?
Okay. High points for me are the connections with my peers in education, the resources, and my children. I call them my children because that's what they are. They know that they're my children. And that is what keeps me there, because sometimes I get so burnt out on all of the things that I'm required to do. I kind of have to remind myself of why I got into it in the first place. So definitely my peers, they encourage me. My children, they teach me like I teach them. They teach me so much in patience and love, and how to be gentle and slow to anger, different things like that. So it's a challenge, but I love that aspect of being able to learn with my students. That's why I do it. I love that part. That's definitely a high point for me. And then also another high point for me, of course, as I said, is the resources. So I don't know if many people know, but Canton is not struggling for many resources. Like, we have iPad cards and things like that. And so going into it, I was actually misled to believe that I wouldn't have very many resources, but it's actually the opposite. I go to many professional developments and different things like that. We have access to, of course, internet and different things. I mean, the resources are endless, and I love that. I love that, we have the freedom to choose what we want to bring in and out of the classroom to a certain extent. So again, I love that. A low point, I would have to say, would be how, to an extent, there is micromanagement in education, and I don't particularly like that so much. I knew coming in that there were going to be certain things that I had to do. And then I thought once I was given those instructions that people would kind of back off and say, okay, well, you're the teacher, it's your classroom, you do what you feel is best for your children. And it's more of like a hand holding thing, like I'm not certified to do what I'm supposed to do or different things like that. It's like, I feel like people are watching my every move, and really essentially it's all for data.
Yeah.
And not necessarily for the benefit of the whole child. That burns me up. And that right there alone made me kind of want to walk away. But I didn't, because I knew the kids needed someone to advocate for them. And all the time oftentimes we get so concerned with the number, data. We get so concerned with data that we forget about the whole child.
Yeah.
And that is an extreme low for me, because I feel like it's a disservice to these children.
Well, so let's dig into that a little bit. As I talk to teachers, often I hear, what you're saying, I hear often that teachers feel like they are handcuffed at times. They don't have freedom in the classroom to teach. They feel like we spend so much time focused on testing and the accountability model that the human element of teaching has been taken out of it. Do you see that? Is that what you're describing? And what do we do about it?
That's definitely what I see. Absolutely what I see. And the idea of being handcuffed or bound to certain things, whether we agree with it or not, I definitely see that happening more often now. Here's what I see. At the end of the day, when that door closes, it's my classroom. I'm going to make sure I give my students a solid foundation, so that they can be propelled forward and be productive members of society. I'm going to make sure that their data is right, but I also have to make sure that they're good people.
Well, it seems like, teachers are professionals, and you go into this and you get training because you love the idea of educating kids.
Right.
And yet, once you get your own classroom, it's like we make policy assuming that teachers don't know what they're doing. And so we have to hold their hand and tell them what to do at every step of the way, because we don't trust them to make decisions that are the best for their classroom.
Right.
And to me, that's been catastrophic on teachers. I think that's why we're running out a lot of our best and brightest teachers, because we're not treating them like the professionals they are.
Right.
So I guess my question is, a lot of this bureaucracy and the red tape and the hand holding and the maybe overemphasis on testing seems to has come out of a well-intended goal of sort of holding education to a higher standard or measuring progress. But the problem is, testing is only one way of measuring progress, and it really only measures a student's ability to take a test. What do you think? Testing is one measure, but what's the best way to measure students' progress and sort of show that students are doing well?
Performance tasks are really, really great at measuring what a student has learned, because it prompts them to be able to pull out all of that knowledge that they've learned and acquired and putting it into this great big work of art. And I think that is extremely beneficial to a learner. So, like, for example, I teach English. So I think in order for me, like maybe as an end of the year project performance task, I might give my students a writing prompt. Now, all of my students don't like to write, but they like writing more when they write about something they're passionate about.
Sure.
So maybe I come up with a list of writing prompts, and they get to choose one that they feel connected to in some way, or they feel like they can write a lot of material about. And in that, I can assess a lot of different things. I can assess their grammar. I can assess their usage. I can assess so many different things through that performance task. And it's not just specific to English. You can do this for math. You can do this for PE. You can do this for just about every subject. And you can assess so many different things with one task. And the student won't really notice that it's so many different aspects that are being assessed. But I think it's a really, really fun way and an engaging way to measure learning. rather than a test.
So part of that is helping them demonstrate mastery, right?
Right, exactly. And I think we shy away from it because it requires a little bit more work. Instead of, instead of circling A, B, C, or D, the teacher has to create a rubric for this. And it takes a lot of time, and it happens over time. A performance task doesn't take like a day or two. Performance tasks are stretched out over maybe 1 to 2 weeks. It depends on how long and how much you want to measure. And so it requires a lot of planning. It requires very defined parameters. There can't be any wiggle room. You have to be very specific in what you want the learner to show you. And that's why you create a rubric, so the learner knows beforehand, okay, these are the boxes I've got to check to make sure I perform at this level, or whatever the case may be. And so I think that would be a sort of an alternative to a test that will actually benefit them greatly in the future. You can do so many different things with a performance task that you can't do with a test.
Yeah. I understand you're interested in starting a school. Is that right?
Yes, I am very, very interested in starting a school.
Well, tell me a little bit about kind of what you have in mind.
I'm actually thinking of a private route instead of a public route, so we won't be as bound as we would be if we were to go the public route to testing. I feel like it's doing a disservice to our learners. And primarily my goal is to tailor instruction to the whole child. And what I have seen teaching in Canton is predominantly what happens in these types of communities, in the African American communities. They're born into single family homes. They're born into poverty sometimes, and they're born into situations they cannot control. They did not ask for this situation. They did not ask for these parents, and they're already 2 steps behind in a sense. And so education doesn't always come easy for them. My whole idea behind this was to find a way to bridge the gap, because there is a gap between where they are and where they need to be. And my former college professor, her name is Cindy Milton, I think the world of her. She said that our job as educators is to take students from where they are, meet them where they are, to try to successfully get them to where they need to be. And so that would be my whole mission in creating this private education system for this targeted group of kids. I want it to be academically challenging. I want it to be rigorous. I want it to be as close to the real world as it can be without being jaded and without those negative influences. I want to challenge students so when they meet these challenges in the real world, they'll be prepared. But so hopefully the Lord will send donors. I'm praying on that, but also, some of our students will be able to afford the cost of tuition. And so I think it'll be a combination of both, unless someone comes along and educates me on a different way that I can do it. I'm very young, and like I said, this is just a dream right now. It's something that I'm very passionate about.
This has been a great conversation. Khrysten, thank you for taking time to visit with us. Thank you for what you do for the students in Canton, and I look forward to watching your vision of a new school come to life. And it's been a delight visiting with you. Thank you for coming on.
Thank you so much.